Can you just tell me a little bit about, like, explain what that concept is and how it relates into what we're just talking about Nietzsche's philosophy?
Yeah, so the eternal recurrence is a very important part of his philosophy. I mean, he says himself that it's sort of the crown of his own philosophy. But considering that it's very vague and unclear when he does bring it up, it's only brought up maybe in like three times in his entirety of his texts, and so there's a lot of different interpretations as to what exactly he's trying to say when he's doing that and when he's saying this. But in my view, it's supposed to be the ultimate affirmation of life, of the attitude of Amor Fati sort of in practice. So the eternal recurrence is like a thought experiment, which he posits in The Gay Science, where he says, imagine if a demon sort of comes to you in the middle of the night in your loneliest of lonelies, and he tells you that your life as you have lived it, you have already lived it infinite times in the past, and you will live it infinite times in the future in exactly the same way, and there's nothing else but your life forever. Every single sigh and every single bit of suffering and dissatisfaction will be repeated forever. And the point of the eternal recurrence is to tease out what your attitude towards life is. Nietzsche reckons that most people, when faced with this demon, would not be happy at this result. They would sort of think, "Oh no, my life is meaningless because that's all there is. I'll have to do this forever, and it doesn't lead anywhere. There's no point to it, and la di da." But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. There's no logical reason. Again, when we point to the limits of rationality, this sort of conclusion isn't something you reach logically. It's just an expression of your character, a reflection of your character. And so the person who responds in this way, all he is sort of showing is his lack of love for life. The Übermensch, which is another one of Nietzsche's very famous concepts, very vague and often misinterpreted. But the Übermensch, I've always read him as the person who can say yes to the eternal recurrence, who wouldn't just be okay with the eternal recurrence happening, but he would be happy. The demon would be a god to him, an angel. He would thank the demon for telling him this news, because he's sort of like, wow, my life forever? There's no greater news than this. And the Übermensch is someone who's not only capable of saying it in that moment, but he's somebody who would choose to recur to who choose the eternal recurrence in any moment of his life. Just imagine the worst tragedy that's happened to him. His entire family has just died. Still he would choose to recur life infinitely because he just loves it so much. I guess the attitude Nietzsche wants us to embrace, I think, is always like a child who sort of goes on a roller coaster and just gets off the roller coaster and it's just like immediately another one, another one, another one. I must go again. I love that so much. Yeah, that's the kind of attitude Nietzsche wants us to adopt towards life. And it's very, very hard, obviously, given our circumstances, to be someone who can at all times be willfully able to uh, um, recur our life infinitely. But that is why I think Nietzsche would put it as the Übermensch, the beyond human. It's a task for not for us, but for somebody who surpasses us right now, I suppose.
But it's something that we should strive to. It's an attitude towards life that we should strive to embrace.
Yeah, I think that's the way Nietzsche would understand it. I think, again, it's a bit controversial to say this, especially because, as we've been stressing throughout this whole talk, Nietzsche is a very anti-teleological, goal-oriented thinker. So, if you put sort of the Übermensch or affirming life as your goal to reach, that's a bit self-defeating, and that's not great. But I'd say generally, yes.
But we should be, according to Nietzsche, we should be embracing all of those things and seeing them as good in and of itself. Not we shouldn't be striving to change those things, but we should be striving to see those things and embrace those things as something that is both necessary and positive.
Yes, yes. Well, the main attitude Nietzsche calls us to embrace is an attitude of amor fati, right? Which is something he takes from the Stoics and literally means love of one's fate. It's the idea of just being completely content with the here and now and wanting absolutely nothing to be different, all in the past and forever in the future. And yeah, he's also stresses sort of unity of opposites. His book Beyond Good and Evil, the really famous one, it's obviously arguing against the binary of good and evil, but it's also arguing against binaries in general. And this is because for Nietzsche, all sort of these phenomena are interlinked. Good and evil and right and wrong, and all these things are only make sense in opposition to each other. So you can't really remove sort of this one part that you don't like and sort of only focus on the good part. Um, you know, I think the best point you can see this is with like joy and suffering. I mean, Nietzsche himself talks about this. This is his own life is a testament to this in some sense. Because even though he suffered like heavily, he would have moments of incredible joy as soon as he was healthy. He was completely sick and didn't, was vomiting, couldn't see, had intense migraines for weeks on end. And then as soon as he came out of his sort of period of illness, he would go on these insane, like 8-hour hikes and, write entire books in multiple days, in just a few days. And the way he describes it, at least in particular his autobiography Etche Homo, if that's where you want to see most of that books, is it's very interesting to see the least. And I think Nietzsche himself embodies this sort of attitude that he's advocating for, this unity of opposites, this paradox of sort of health and sickness and truth and falsity and good and
Beyond,
bad and joy and
be,
suffering.
beyond the good and evil.